Hi, and welcome to CryptoBiography. I'm your host, Brandon Starr. This is episode 445 of CryptoBiography, and it's a compilation of a story that came out around on Christmas and the week before Christmas a few years ago, episodes 287, 288, and it is The Bite Before Christmas. And I hope you enjoy this compilation, and here we go. It was only a few days before Christmas, and the people of the Willow Glen neighborhood were doing what they'd been doing for several weeks now, hunkering in their houses and occasionally looking out their upper-story windows at the zombies shambling across their manicured lawns, which were still looking pretty good since the cold weather was keeping the grass from growing. A few days into the apocalypse, the power had gone out. Everyone charged their batteries and stretched as best they could, but the cell phone tower stopped working a week later. About that time, the water had stopped running. By then, all the people of Willow Glen had filled every container they could. Since then, they had started to go stir-crazy, waiting for the end of it all, or for salvation that wasn't coming. In the Sanderson household, Mom Katie and Dad Wayne were watching their kids, Georgie, 9, Travis, 7, and Sammy, 4. The first days had actually been a challenge, as the kids were going wild from boredom and fear. But as soon as it became clear that their noise brought the undead scratching on their doors and windows for hours, even Sammy had stopped her crying. Why was Willow Glen spared on this holiday season from the total overrun that had taken almost every other neighborhood in the city, county, state, and country? 8 months ago, an extremely aggressive, extremely charismatic, and extremely successful home security salesman, Rick Longton, had come through. He had sold nearly every house the Total Defense package. In fact, he had sold it to everyone except the Wilsons, across the street from the Sandersons, and that had only been because the Wilsons had been on vacation in Baton Rouge. They were now dead. While the Sandersons were grateful for the Total Defense package and the blockadable windows and heavy-duty doors it provided, things were extremely upsetting for them all. The water was plentiful, but once some of it had started to get bacterial slime, Katie and Wayne had insisted on putting a capful of bleach in every container, which corrected the issue but made the water taste bad. And since they hadn't had electricity or fuel to cook, meals became increasingly dull and strange. Rice, soaked in water, never getting soft, a single can of peaches having to be the family dessert for 2 days running, and so on. Like most suburban neighborhoods, their house was surrounded by other houses all around. It was half a mile to walk to anything, and they didn't know if there was anything still there to walk to. Wayne still knew that at some point in the next few weeks, or at most months, they would have to make a run for it somewhere, and in his heart, he knew that he would have to go first to see if he could find a path without becoming a zombie snack. And he knew in the heart beneath his heart that this attempt would kill him. Before the zombies came, Wayne had been a CPA. He'd gone to the gym, but rarely more than a few times a month. He had a paunch, which was somewhat shrinking during this time of stress and rationed food, but he had few muscles and little stamina. Because of the isolated nature of the suburbs, hardly any people came through. There were a few groups at first, but they then thinned out. As they thinned out, the zombies did as well. Yet they could almost always see at least one roaming around. The kids had started to nickname them. Wayne and Katie frowned on it at first, but despite trying to read every book they owned and play every game, eventually the kids were spending lots of time looking out the windows. Bonefoot was a favorite. He trailed a fleshless leg while he lurched from house to house. Baby Jane made an almost daily appearance. A child zombie, she seemed too small to be a threat, yet every time she made an appearance, she had fresh blood on her face. And old Granny Z, who never had any blood on her and walked extremely slowly, got drier and more brittle-looking every time they saw her. It was 4 days before Christmas when Wayne and Katie decided they would have to take action. Wayne had been going to the attached garage to run the engines of the 2 cars briefly. They did this to make sure the batteries didn't die, and also to charge one, and only one, phone a little bit to see if they could get any information. This had yielded results for a while, but now that there was no service of any kind, phone, but now there was no service of any kind, phone or internet. They now just cycled the phone off of airplane mode occasionally to see if anything came up. If they ever saw a connection, they would call for help, but it never happened. And in those first few days before the service completely disappeared, calling 911 or the police or anyone at all they could think of was met with unanswered phones. Because they had some books downloaded to the phone, they also used the battery to read and reread those books. But mostly the phone sat by, waiting for the occasional, half-despairing attempt to reach for a signal. This day, as always, Wayne went to the garage alone while Katie watched the kids. It didn't take long to run the cars, because he couldn't run them long. With all the windows and doors shut up tight, running the engine for more than a few minutes was dangerous. Today they'd made a decision. Both cars ran on regular unleaded, and the Tercel was getting low. It was below a quarter tank. The Explorer, thank goodness, had been nearly full when the zombies came, and was still about 3/4 full. His attempts, every 3 days now, to make sure the batteries never ran out and that they could keep their cell phone going had been successful. Hopefully, the cars would still move, but there was no way to move either vehicle more than a foot without opening the garage door, and that idea was a non-starter. They did have a 2-gallon gas can. It was empty, and had been ever since they'd bought it a few years ago, when it had only been purchased after a mix-up when each of them had thought the other had filled up the Tercel, and they'd run out of gas. He found an old hose, checked to see if it was reasonably clean, and cut it off about 6 feet from the end, and started a siphon. Of course, he got some in his mouth, and was barely able to put the end of the hose into the can while sputtering and spitting out gasoline. He kept spitting and wiping his face with his sleeve until the can filled, then raised it up until the gasoline stopped flowing. He put those 2 gallons into the Explorer, then repeated the process until the Tercel had only enough to get a few miles in an emergency. Doing this was the decision they'd made. It was fine to have a backup car, but they wanted to have as full a tank as possible in one vehicle, and that was the one that could go off-road in an emergency. Neither of them had any doubts but that the roads would be in a horrible condition, and that they would likely have to run zombies down. Those things would be far easier to do in an SUV. They weren't planning on driving, not yet. They had no destination to go to. Deep down, they knew the odds of them getting enough information to find a real destination to make a break for was vanishingly small. They knew that one of these days, they would have to get in that Explorer and just take off and hope that they could find someplace safe. Someplace safe. It seemed like a dream. Now they only had one vehicle they could count on, but that didn't bother them. They had no intention of splitting up the family. It was the day before Christmas, and Wayne was finally totally sure he couldn't taste or smell any more gasoline. It had taken so long because he couldn't wash the gasoline off properly due to their water rationing, and changing clothes only did so much. Wayne was trying to get some sleep in their bed because they tried to keep one of the adults awake at all times in case of attack. Katie was also dozing on the sofa as it turned out. Normally she'd just discourage the kids, and especially young Sammy, from looking out the windows too much. They were both jolted out of sleep by their youngest child. "Santa! It's Santa!" Sammy was crying. Wayne and Katie were both jarred awake and came from their different directions to see what was the matter. They looked down and immediately spotted what Sammy was talking about. It was Santa, and not a zombie, but a human, in a full Santa outfit, complete with a big white beard. Though there were a few stains on the outfit, he did not look to be in bad shape. He was walking, not too fast, but seemingly with purpose, from the house kitty corner across from them to the Wilsons' house. He came around the garage, saw that the door had been smashed open by zombies, and continued to the house on the right. For that house, they didn't know the people who lived there, but they had seen occasional movement in the upstairs windows, so they had come to the conclusion that they were still among the living. Wayne and Katie looked at each other, then both, as one, banged on their windows to get Santa's attention. He heard, for he turned towards them, and, after a moment of squinting, waved merrily at them, then pointed at his wrist, made a circle in the air, then continued to the next house. He pointed at his wrist, like a wristwatch? Katie asked. Maybe he's asking us to wait? Yeah, you gotta be right, Wayne said, and that circle probably means he's going around the neighborhood and he'll be with us later. Won't a zombie get him? Katie asked. She was genuinely scared for this man who seemed to harbor no fear for the zombies. Santa knocked and eventually was let into the house by the Wilsons' old place. After a while, he left, waving as he went, and continued down the street and out of the Sandersons' sight. But someone else saw him. Baby Jane was back in the neighborhood and was now half shuffling, half running down the sidewalk toward Santa. Wayne and Katie gasped, but they did not dare try to help. Bonefoot was also in view. Going outside was even more dangerous than it otherwise would have been. Bonefoot didn't seem to have noticed Santa, but Baby Jane had. She was loping out of their sight after him. Wayne, Katie, and all three kids watched with bated breath. After a short time, Baby Jane headed back away from Santa, with no additional blood on her. She didn't attack him. Why not? Katie whispered. They continued to watch, but saw nothing else until over an hour later. Santa came up their side of the street, visible as he visited the house next door. He was walking as though he had not a care in the world, even bouncing slightly, making his stomach wobble. He spent a few minutes out of sight, either in front of the door or inside their home, then walked back out to the sidewalk and in full view of any zombie in the neighborhood, strode down it and then up the driveway to the Sanderson house. The Sandersons were scrambling down the stairs and to the front door. They didn't open it. "Ho, ho, ho, ho! May I come in?" "Santa?" Wayne asked. "Yes, let us talk." Wayne found his hands were shaking, but after a moment he undid the several blockades from the total defense package that kept the door barricaded, and for the first time in all the weeks since the zombies came, opened the door. It was indeed a man in a Santa costume. He seemed more or less right for the role. He was chubby and had smiling eyes and wore gold wire-rimmed spectacles on a red nose that stuck out exactly like a cherry. The volumes of white hair that flowed from under his red cap and the similar waves of white beard hair seemed all to be genuine. "Please come in," said Katie, gently tugging on Wayne's shoulder so he would step back and give Santa room. Santa stepped in and looked down at the children, all of whom, even the eldest, were looking up at him in a kind of awe. "Are you Santa?" said Sammy, who somehow was the first to find her voice. "Indeed, and I'm planning on giving a very special gift to all of you tomorrow on Christmas." "What is it?" asked Travis, who was at that slightly mercenary age. "I'm taking everyone in the neighborhood to a safer place," Santa said. "Safer?" Wayne asked, not so much doubtful as shocked. "Where?" "There's a place not too far away, walled and with plenty of beds and lots of people." "How come the zombies don't eat you?" Georgie asked, always the most practical of the siblings. "Good question. The honest answer is, I don't know. When zombies see me from a distance, they come towards me like anyone else, but when they get close, they just lose interest and wander off." "Natural immunity," Katie said. "There's often a tiny minority of people who are immune to any one disease. You must simply be immune." "As good an explanation as any," Santa said, and he laughed up his big ho, ho, ho. "But it's kept me busy, I can tell you, locating and bringing back food and supplies when no one else can. Also just approaching the walls when the zombies try to climb them, getting them to wander off." "So, do you still have a working vehicle that can fit you all?" "Yes," said Wayne, a little proudly. "Wonderful. I'll be leading a bit of a parade on foot. Tomorrow at noon, when we pass by, unlatch your garage door. I'll open it, then all of you will come out in your vehicle and take up the next place in line. If any zombies come, I'll shoo them away. We'll go at this rather slow speed all the way to—" "Your workshop?" said Sammy excitedly. "Well, yes," Santa said. "We won't be making any quick trips back, so bring whatever you think you'll need with you in your vehicle. If there are any zombies nearby, don't panic. Just beep if I don't seem to have spotted them, and I'll come back and get you clear." "Thank you, Santa," said Katie, and meant it. She hugged him, and he laughed again. They sent Santa on his way, hoping that nothing bad would happen to him. Then they packed up, looking for all the world like a family preparing to go on vacation, except for the useful tools and such that they also decided to bring. "So we're going off with Santa on Christmas in the Explorer?" Travis asked. "Yes," said Wayne, who had just closed the back of the Explorer with their last bag and come back into the kitchen. "Does that make our car one of Santa's reindeer?" Travis asked. "Sure," Wayne said. Which one? Travis asked. Wayne thought. Donner, he said, and tried not to let the irony show on his face. Katie thought for a moment, then accidentally smacked him on the shoulder. The next day was Christmas, and all through the house everyone was stirring, because they were all excited to be anywhere besides the house. The morning crawled by, and finally noon arrived. It's Santa, the kids all screamed as he walked into view, coming down the middle of the street. Baby Jane walked up to him, but a few steps away, turned and wandered away. Santa was already followed by several cars from the neighbors down the street. The Sandersons piled into Donner, with Wayne already in the driver's seat and the engine running. Katie unlatched the garage door and then ran into the Explorer. Santa lifted the garage door by hand, then went back to the road. The parade continued, and the Sandersons took their place at the end, soon followed by more of their neighbors. They went at a walking pace, rather than dashing away, but it was easily the happiest Christmas any of them could remember. And Santa said aloud, as their houses passed out of sight, "Merry Christmas to all, and let no zombie bite." And that's the story. And so normally my episodes come out on Sunday. Because this one was a Christmas-themed one, I went ahead and just put it out immediately. This is just before Christmas Eve that I'm recording this, and I'm going to put it out right away. And it'll probably go out more or less right on Christmas Eve. And therefore, this is the one for this week. So there won't be one on Sunday, but I'll be, back the following Sunday. So this is ahead of time because of the Christmas theme. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for listening. If you have any comments or questions about this episode or previous episodes, cryptobiography@gmail.com, or hit us up on Facebook or Blue Sky especially. And thanks for listening. Words of Music copyright 2025, Brandon Starr, all rights reserved. Characters and events are fictional, fictionalized, or satirical.